everyone, welcome back to Oxvlog, or welcome if you're new here. I just want to start off by saying I hope you're all doing really well. You know, this has been a really tricky year for everyone, and I just hope that you're all coping okay, that your lives are starting to look up again, and yeah, I'm sending you all my good wishes virtually. I also wanted to say a huge congratulations to everyone who has accepted offers for Oxford. I'm so excited for you guys. You're going to have such a great time, I'm sure. A bit about me. Some of you might actually recognise me because I used to make videos on the Oxford channel back in 2017 to 18. I was in second year at the time. I've now just finished my fourth year. I haven't graduated because obviously the ceremonies were cancelled this year, but you know, I've officially kind of finished my time at Oxford. I'm now just looking at going into full-time work. So I've been spending a lot of time doing job applications at the moment, and that kind of brings me on to today's topic because I've been writing a load of cover letters, and honestly it's the most draining thing ever, but I actually think there are a lot of similarities between cover letters and personal statements. So I'm going to be using my past experience and also kind of things that I've learned over the past few weeks as I've been applying for jobs. And yeah, I'm going to be just sharing some of my tips on how to write a good personal statement. I will also be reading the one that I submitted at the end of this video, so if you need a bit of inspiration or if you're just interested to hear what I wrote, then yeah, keep watching. I do also want to say that although I studied at Oxford, these tips are applicable to people applying for any university. I'm going to try not to make it too kind of Oxbridge-centric. I mean, I will be talking about kind of interviews and tutorials and stuff, but I hope that some of these tips will be relevant to you no matter what subject you're applying for or where you're applying to. So starting off with the introduction, this is obviously a really important part of your personal statement because it's the first thing that the tutors are going to be reading. It's where you make your first impression, and it's really difficult actually because you don't want to be too kind of dry, otherwise you're not going to attract their attention, but at the same time you don't want to fall into the trap of kind of using cliches, just sort of sounding insincere. So what I would recommend is just kind of in the first paragraph talking about why you want to study the particular subject you're applying for. I think it can actually be quite useful to save the introduction until you've written the rest of the personal statement, just so you know kind of what's coming and you can kind of foreshadow that a bit in the introduction. Also, if you're struggling to decide which subject you want to study, I'd recommend just writing personal statements for all of them, then kind of seeing which one resonates the most with you, which one you found easiest to write, because usually if you find it quite easy to write about why you want to study a subject, that suggests that it's kind of better suited to you and that you're more interested in it. So in this paragraph, I'd recommend kind of focusing on what you've enjoyed while studying the subject at school. So for example, which modules you found particularly interesting, because that's what you're going to be able to speak most confidently about. Now, if you're applying for a subject that you haven't studied before, so maybe law or medicine, I'd recommend just trying to find similarities and links between the subjects you are studying and the one you want to study. So for example, if you wanted to study law, you might talk about how you really enjoy analysing sources in history or English if you do humanities kind of subjects, or if you're more of a science-based student, you could talk about how you enjoy kind of using evidence to reach conclusions, that kind of thing. Just kind of think about how the subjects you're studying at the moment are relevant to the one you want to study and have kind of helped you form that decision. So in general, I would advise you to keep this paragraph pretty short. You know, it's kind of a given that you want to study the subject, otherwise you wouldn't be applying for it. So I don't think you need to go into too much detail about that, because kind of the more you talk about it, the less sincere you're going to sound, because it's going to seem as if you're kind of overcompensating for a lack of true enthusiasm, if that makes any sense. I don't know, that's just kind of my opinion. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's no right or wrong. If you want to spend more time focusing on that, that's great. I'm just speaking from my own personal experience. So, you know, take everything I say with a pinch of salt, because obviously personal statements, it's in the name, it's a personal thing, so yeah, you do you. So the paragraph that I would actually spend the most time on is the one about how you're pursuing your interest in the subject outside school. Because it's all very well being interested in what's on the syllabus, but that doesn't show that you've kind of developed an independent interest in your subject at all. So I think it's really important to make a distinction between what you've enjoyed at school and also what you've enjoyed doing in your free time to kind of expand on that. So some examples of some things you might want to talk about are books you've read, talks you've attended, workshops you've participated in, online courses you've completed, just anything that shows that you've gone kind of out of your way a little bit to deepen your knowledge. And it's really important that the things you talk about in this paragraph are things that you've done of your own accord. Like, it's all very well saying you went to see a play or something, but if that was part of a school trip, that's not very impressive because you were kind of forced to do that anyway as part of your course. So, focus on things that you've done and that no one else in your class has done, and the tutors should be very impressed by that. Now, it can be kind of tricky to know where to start with these kinds of things. You know, I was lucky enough to grow up in Cambridge where there are a lot of kind of academic events going on all the time. So I think I had a kind of advantage, but you know, you might be living in a village in the middle of nowhere where there aren't just like random workshops and academic talks every weekend. So in that case, just ask around, you know, talk to your teacher, maybe ask your school to put you in contact with old students who've gone on to study your course at university. And yeah, you should be able to find something. Also, the internet is your best friend. There are so many online resources, so many free courses that you can do. I would actually really recommend a website called FutureLearn. I'll link it down below. That they do a whole range of free online courses covering so many different subjects. So you will almost definitely be able to find something relevant that you could talk about, and that will just show that you enjoy going beyond the syllabus a bit. If you're a humanities student, it can also be quite hard to kind of work out which books to read. So I would say again, it's a good idea to get recommendations from your teachers. But if that's not possible, I would actually suggest going on the websites of the universities you're applying to and looking at the syllabus for first year students and just picking books off there. I actually did that for both the languages I studied, and in both cases that book came up in my interview, and I think it was actually really good because the tutors had actually taught those texts to real students. So by talking about them in my interview, I was almost simulating a tutorial. So I think they really got an idea of what kind of student I was, whether I was able to hold a conversation about a book kind of thing. So I think that kind of thing can really work in your favour. I think it's also a really great idea to do a paragraph about work experience you've done, voluntary work, anything you've done to kind of show that you're starting to think about career options for after university and how you're going to use your degree after you've graduated. Now obviously when you're 17, 18, 19, you're not going to know what you want to do with the rest of your life. You know, if you're doing a very vocational degree like law or medicine again, maybe it's a bit more obvious, but I know plenty of people who've done both those degrees who've gone on to do completely different things. So yeah, don't sort of worry if you haven't decided what your future's going to look like at all. But I think it is really good if you have done anything, especially if it's quite academic, to mention it. For example, you might have shadowed someone in a law firm, you might have done some work abroad, you might have volunteered in a hospital, you might have done some writing for a student newspaper or something. If you're applying for a more creative subject, you could talk about how you've participated in orchestras, or you've done photography shoots for people. Anything at all that is sort of career related that you've done is a really good thing to mention. You just want to focus on kind of what you've learnt from those experiences, and also, how you might apply the skills you've developed in future situations. So, for example, I did a bit of work experience in a French-speaking office, so I talked about how that made me realise I did want to do some work abroad in a kind of francophone environment, and it also just helped me develop my spoken French, which is obviously useful if you're going to go on and do a degree in that subject. Again, I appreciate that it can be really, really tricky to find work, and you might not be living in a big city, so there might not be that many job opportunities near you. I will say again though, just ask around, ask your family, ask your friends' families, your teachers, You could put an ad in a local newspaper even. And I would also highly recommend offering voluntary services to companies, because honestly, there's nothing most businesses like better than just getting free work done for them. So any opportunities you can get that you think you could vaguely relate back to your degree would be brilliant. But again, don't worry, this is just kind of optional paragraph, but I think it does sound impressive. So I would recommend trying to find some kind of work if possible. I will just say work experience is also really great in general, because it kind of gives you a taster of what it would be like to actually go into that profession. Like, I know multiple people who went and worked in law firms and decided afterwards that there was no way they were going down that route. So I think it can be a really useful thing to do just in terms of personal development, and it also just helps you kind of become more confident, more kind of aware of the sector and that kind of thing. And then finally, you might want to talk a bit about some of your extracurricular activities. I know there's a lot of kind of stigma around that. I've heard a lot of people say kind of you shouldn't devote more than 10% of your personal statement to talking about that kind of thing. And in a way I do agree, but I also think it is actually quite a good thing to show that you have a life outside studying and working. Because, you know, universities have so many societies, so many non-academic opportunities, and I think tutors are going to want to take on people who are actually going to have fun at the same time as working hard. And I say having these hobbies just makes you sound like a bit more of an interesting person, and also shows that you can kind of manage your time, so get all your work done and have time for leisure activities. So yes, a couple of things you might want to talk about are kind of creative interests. So if you play an instrument, for example, or you enjoy writing, and other interests, maybe you play sports at quite a high level, maybe you make YouTube videos, maybe you enjoy travelling. I will just say though, maybe don't talk about DOV if you've done it. I don't know if times have changed, but definitely in my time, pretty much everyone did DOV, so it just wasn't impressive at all to say you'd done it because everyone else in the country had. So talk about things which kind of distinguish you from all the other candidates. And it's the same with musical instruments, like only mention them if either you're studying a music related subject or if you've got to quite a high grade. And then finally, moving on to the conclusion, I would recommend keeping this quite short and sweet, just kind of wrapping up what you're saying, maybe summarising a little bit. I would say your concluding paragraph should be kind of 1 or 2 sentences max, and it should just be a way of kind of rounding everything off, just making sure that you're not ending very abruptly. That is all my advice on kind of the content of your personal statement. I do have a couple of top tips as well. So number 1 is to check your spelling, punctuation and grammar. I cannot stress this enough. Honestly, one typo can make so much difference in the impression that you're giving off, so really make sure that you've edited your personal statement thoroughly. Get friends, families, teachers, whoever to read it through as well. Yeah, in general it's really great to get lots of perspectives, so ask as many people as you can to kind of double check your statement, make sure it flows. Next tip would be to include lots of paragraphs. There is nothing tutors are going to want less than to have one big chunk of text. It's just not easy to read. They're going to want to know where the distinctions lie between your different arguments. And it's just really good to have more paragraphs, because then it shows that you've got more different things to talk about and that you're a more kind of well-rounded student. I'd also advise you not to use too much fancy language, because I think it's very easy to kind of come across as insincere if you do. Try to avoid kind of going on Google and looking up synonyms for words, because normally if those words aren't in your vocabulary anyway, they're just going to sound kind of out of place in your text. So yeah, try to avoid sounding clumsy and just kind of write as you normally would. Obviously maintain quite a formal tone, but yeah, don't overdo it. I also just want to remind you that you don't need to cover everything. You know, there's a real temptation to speak about everything you've ever done in your life that has somehow brought you to where you are today, but obviously the word count is pretty limited. So you really want to focus on things that are most relevant to your degree of choice. I'd also say it's a lot better to devote more words to fewer things than to write kind of one sentence about 1,000 different things you've done, because that will just make it look rushed and it will make it look as if you're kind of trying to cram in everything. And actually, I think my personal statement was a little on the kind of full side. I don't know, you guys can judge it in the comments below. My next tip is that if you're doing joint honours, make sure that you devote equal time in your statement to both subjects. I think if you are a lot more keen on one subject, it will shine through. So yeah, just make sure you genuinely want to study both, because if you are doing joint honours, you're going to be interviewed by 2 different tutors at least, and they're both going to want to take someone who's actually enthusiastic about their subject. So just make sure you actually are, and make sure that that is reflected in what you're saying. My penultimate point is, don't use the word passionate. It's kind of a given that you're passionate about the subject, otherwise you wouldn't be pursuing it any further. I think if you are really enthusiastic about your subject, it will come through in what you're saying anyway. So yeah, you really don't need to kind of overcompensate with words like that. Avoid that word like the plague. Sorry, that's probably not the best metaphor to use at the moment. And finally, a really important tip, if you're applying to somewhere where they interview candidates, make sure you've actually done everything you say in your personal statement. I know people who wrote about books that they hadn't read, and it just made for a very awkward interview pretty much. So yeah, make sure you've actually read the books, make sure you've really thought about them, kind of come up with potential questions that you might be asked about them, and you should be fine. Actually, speaking of interviews, if any of you would like me to do a kind of video talking about my tips for interviews, then definitely leave a comment down below and I will be sure to do that at some point. If you guys are writing your personal statements and would like someone to have a look through and give you kind of further advice, I'm really happy to read them for you. So yeah, just leave a comment down below, or maybe DM us on Instagram or Facebook, and I will definitely do that for you. So thank you so much for watching. I've really enjoyed making this video again. It's been ages since I last spoke to a camera and it does feel a bit weird, but I'm really excited to carry on doing this. I'm going to try and upload a video a week. Can't promise that I will stick to that, but I will really try my best. And yeah, if you have any requests, do leave them down below, and we will do our best to make videos on those particular topics. I hope this was useful for some of you, and good luck if you are writing personal statements anytime soon. I'm sure that will be wonderful. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon.